Thanks so much for watching this presentation. This is part 3 of 3, where we are showing you how to hack HR in 3 weeks. In case you missed our earlier editions, they can be watched right now. They're online. The first one is about sexual harassment in the workplace, and we also did a presentation on crucial changes in HR you need to know about in 2018. So today we're talking about performance management. And we're going to tackle such subjects as how and why to structure your performance management process, including some big questions like, is once a year enough? Should we be using ratings? And should we be doing this at all? So let's get started. First, we just a little bit about us at PEAR Core Solutions. Steph and I provide day-to-day HR support to our clients, including matters related to performance management, such as how and when to give employees feedback, how to handle performance review discussions, how to design performance management processes that work for your company. So at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about what we do. But for now, Steph, why don't you get us started?
So it's probably important for us to start by defining what we mean when we talk about performance management. Most people know performance management as the, quote, yearly review, as well as dealing with disciplinary issues. But we see performance management as an ongoing day-to-day process. Your manager should be providing constant feedback to employees, even if it's not an official part of your performance management process. When you set goals for employees and track their progress, you're engaging in performance management. The level of empowerment you give or do not give is also performance management. The most common reason for having a performance management system is to collect hard data so that you can make data-driven decisions. We're talking about promotions, demotions, lateral moves, also raises and bonuses. But it can also be leveraged to improve relationships and an employee's overall experience at your company.
All right, so Steph mentioned the yearly review, so let's talk about that a little bit, starting with what's a typical process. And you're all pretty familiar, I'm sure, with the plan. It goes something like this. At the beginning of the year, the manager sits with the employee to set goals and expectations. There's some sort of mid-year check-in to assess current status, maybe do some course corrections. Towards the end of the year, the employee provides a self-assessment. The manager provides an assessment on the employee. And ultimately, those manager ratings are used to make some decisions like compensation or promotions. And then finally, it kind of starts all over again. The manager sits with the employee, discusses how things went, sets some goals for the next year. So on paper, it all seems pretty good. But, let's talk about what really happens. Goals, they're probably never set, or maybe they're set really late in the year, or because they rarely play a very important role in the overall performance review process, they're probably meaningless goals, both to the employee and to the company. The mid-year is probably not going to happen at all. The managers will say things like, who's got the time? And anyway, what am I supposed to say, right? And managerial ratings at the end of the year are probably going to be too harsh, too generous, and either way, they're probably based on an extremely limited set of incidents, which are the only ones the manager can remember when it comes down to it anyway.
So why don't these yearly reviews work? Well, fear of the unknown is one reason. When you only meet once or twice a year, the employee doesn't know what's going to be discussed, and they're terrified. And managers are also afraid of talking about the reviews also. There's also the threat response. Employees are fearful of any ratings that will react badly when the ratings don't match their expectations, and they rarely do. Managers are therefore fearful of communicating the ratings, and who can blame them?
Let's talk about perfection. If the ratings are not perfect, employees are going to feel dejected because you didn't see them as perfect, or they may get angry because they saw themselves as perfect. And they might say or think something like, well, what do you know anyway? You barely spoke to me this year. So, on the opposite side of that, if the ratings are perfect, then employees might wonder why they're not getting promoted or getting a raise or getting some sort of big fat bonus. And then finally, we have the old what's in it for me. And this is an issue for both managers and employees. What does the manager get from taking all of this time, having these excruciating conversations with employees? What does the employee get other than their manager pulling out that one issue that happened 6 months ago to use against them? Are there clear rewards for a good review? Are there clear consequences for a bad review? And for that matter, are there clear rewards or consequences for the manager to even ensure that all of this happens?
So let's review the various reasons why we might want to do a yearly review. And some of these reasons we discussed already, but they all seem pretty reasonable. But based on everything that we just discussed, here's what we actually see happening as a result of this typical process. Performance stays the same or gets worse. Motivation goes down. Employees are angry at managers and possibly vice versa. And most employees, even those who did well, are at least thinking about moving on, if not just for a little while.
So all in all, we were trying to make improvements here, right? And what we probably managed to do instead was perhaps kill our employees' motivation, kill what's probably an already tenuous relationship between managers and their direct reports, and we might even lose a few employees, either right away or soon enough. They're looking. So overall, this doesn't paint a very rosy picture of a constructive way to start the new year. So given this depressing state of affairs we just described, you might be thinking, well, it's probably better just to do nothing at all. After all, this all takes time, it takes resources, and frankly, if it's only doing damage, what's the point? But we believe that it's still important to put structure around managing your employees' performance because ultimately it can be beneficial if it's done well.
There's also the fact that performance management doesn't only happen when you say it's happening. Without an official performance management system in place, you are still providing performance feedback to employees. You may be wondering what that means. Everything managers do, whether disciplining someone, which is a bit more obvious as performance management, but even just saying, hey, great job on that project, or these are the things that could have been done better. This is still part of the management of your employees' performance. But without an official process accompanied by standard procedures and training, there is unlikely to be a consistent or a consistently effective process throughout the company. But before we talk about processes that can work, we need to tackle a subject that has made a lot of news in the past few years, and that's ratings. Are they a good idea when it comes to performance management? How can ratings even be in question? Well, because most of the world's leading companies have been rethinking the value of using ratings in their performance management processes. And why is that? For the very much same reason we just spoke about earlier. You're talking about a process that people already don't like, which is giving and receiving feedback, and then adding grades into the mix, which gives people flashbacks of being in school.
So a quick overview of what we mean when we talk about ratings. We can have either numerical scales, we can have quantitative scales, which avoid the numbers, but are ultimately still a numeric scale. It's going to be a 5-point scale, it's going to be a 7-point scale, etc. Either way. And the idea of the quantitative scales is to humanize the ratings. That's one way to do it, one of the reasons for doing it. The other, however, and this may sound actually backwards, is that a quantitative scale can help improve the accuracy. So, you think that numbers are obviously going to be more accurate, but the truth is it's really a challenge to assign a number to a human being and to do so with pinpoint accuracy. So either way, whichever type of scale is used, the jury is still out. The research is still happening in terms of which one is better, which one is more accurate. So speaking of the jury, we are going to put ratings on trial. It's already happening out there in the world. So let's look at a few of the arguments for and against them. So, the first argument is that a manager checks a few boxes at the end of the year to fulfill their obligation, and they basically then pay no attention to the employees the rest of the year. That is, of course, until the employee does something wrong. On the other hand, if you train and you retrain managers regularly in performance management, you hold them accountable for regular one-to-one conversations, then you're helping to ensure richer interactions and therefore more accurate and more timely performance feedback.
Our next argument for against rating scales is that they create a perfect score that employees will want to reach. And when they don't achieve this perfection, and most will not, and even frequently managers will ensure that they don't, the employee gets demotivated and even angry. And by the way, it doesn't matter if some of the ratings are perfect. Even just one low score will be a drag down on an employee's overall perception of how they did. On the other hand, ratings or no ratings, scales or no scales, employees want to be perfect, and any negative feedback has the possibility of demotivating them. So again, train and retrain managers regularly in providing feedback positively, with the goal of encouraging rather than discouraging employees.
All right, finally, we have the accuracy argument, that they're just simply not accurate. When managers have the best intentions, and let's assume that most of the time they do, there are still common rater biases. For instance, what's called recency bias, which is that ratings are based on things that just happened, even though you might be looking at a whole year. There's leniency or strictness when all the ratings are either good or bad. There's even something called similar to me, which is that you give good ratings because the person, frankly, is like you. Sometimes maybe managers don't have quite the best intentions, and maybe they might shape the ratings to meet some team or personal goals. So either way, the managers can have an effect on what those ratings are like. On the opposite side of that, on the other hand, do we even need to say it one more time? It's all about the training, right? Training and retraining managers regularly in recognizing rating biases and actively questioning ratings as they make them is crucial. And finally, making managers clear on the overall goals. What's going to be done with this data? Why are we doing this at all?
So the plaintiff rests, and now the defense makes its one key argument, and it is a good argument. No ratings means you have no basis for decisions. What else are you supposed to use when deciding if an employee is ready for the next level or in giving bonuses? Do you just go by your gut feeling? So if you're going to use these ratings, you need to make sure that you do it in a careful and consistent manner, and don't disregard the quantitative data either. By the way, if you don't want to use ratings because they bum out your employees or they bum you out, but you still believe they're important in decision making, you can choose a process that does both. We strongly suggest, however, that if you do something like this, that you are entirely open with employees that this is happening. If you tell employees that there are no ratings, but then they find out that there really are, you will have lost their trust.
All right, I think we've spent enough time skewering the yearly review and talking about ratings. We're here to talk about what produces results. And the question you might be asking is, well, what else is there if not a yearly review and ratings? And the quick answer is that there is no definitive answer, which I'm sure nobody really wants to hear. This is very much a field that is constantly evolving, and it changes with every company. But we're going to look at a couple of current best practices that we believe form the basis of strong performance management. The first is a constant process of feedback. It's a feedback loop, back and forth from manager to employee and vice versa. This can only be beneficial in so many ways. These should be both regularly scheduled check-ins. It might be weekly, monthly, quarterly. But feedback should also happen right away whenever it's warranted, in good times and bad. What is talked about in these more formal meetings? Well, that's again another question that has no one right answer, but it should definitely involve reviewing progress on short and long-term goals, thoughts on how the employee is feeling, and yes, I actually use the word feeling here, and some very strategic feedback. You don't want these conversations to turn into all about negative feedback. And again, all of this should be a two-way street. The manager should openly welcome feedback from the employee, both about them as well as the operations in general.
And we also have goal-based management. Employees at all levels should have goals that help both the company and themselves. These are motivating to employees, and even in jobs that don't have the obvious movement upward, and perhaps particularly in jobs like these. Goals can help give employees things to strive for. Goals also communicate that the employee cares for the employee, the company cares for the employee, and wants them to succeed not just at their job, but in life. We know that this concept can be scary for companies, and you might be asking yourself, why should I help my employee gain skills and experiences that will help them get a better job somewhere else. But the answer is simple. If you don't help your employees grow and achieve something, they will leave anyway. If you do help them, they may still leave, but at least you've built loyalty and probably extended their stay. And at least in the meantime, you've hopefully linked these goals to company goals, so you've helped the company along the way. These best practices notwithstanding, there is no one process that works for all companies. You have to take into account the way that your company works, what will work on a daily basis, and what will actually make a difference. Most importantly, you have to know why you are doing it. What goals do you hope to achieve for your company? And until you know this, you won't have a way to know if the performance management process is any good.
All right, so finally, let's briefly talk about a basic strategy for how you put a performance management process into place. And like Steph just mentioned, the first thing we want to do is we need to answer the question of why. What problem are we trying to solve? Are we, for instance, implementing a performance management system only because we've been told to, maybe by our lawyer, or are there other goals we are trying to meet here? If you already have something in place, you should know how and if people are using it and the different ways they might be using it across the company. As well, what about the data that you get from it? Does it actually help? And are employees actually improving because of the process? As far as the design goes, you want to make sure that the process is going to fit into the daily routines of your employees, what's going to motivate them, what's going to demotivate them, etc. And finally, you do a pilot, you get some feedback, you make your changes, you roll out more widely. So that is our very, very quick overview on performance management. A little bit more about what we do here at PEAR Core Solutions, particularly in relation to performance management. We can help you create processes, or if you have one in place already, we'll be happy to review it, provide recommendations, and move on from there. We also provide legal compliance to clients. We're talking about handbooks and the like, day-to-day human resources support, hiring, leadership development, team development, as well as engagement and morale work. So we try to do a little bit of everything. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Again, this is David Friedman and Stephanie Quinn. And thanks again for listening to this. And remember also to check out our previous presentations in the Hack HR series, including sexual harassment and crucial things you need to know for 2018. Thanks very much.